Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I now call the special meeting of the School Board of Palm Beach County to order at 2 p.m. on June 24th, 2020. Mrs. Bass, please call the roll.
District 1, Barbara McQuinn.
Here.
District 2, Chuck Shaw.
Here.
District 3, Karen Brill.
Here.
District 4, Erica Whitfield.
Here.
District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews.
Here.
District 7, Deborah Robinson.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum with all 7 board members present. Also joining us on our virtual dais is Superintendent Dr. Donald Fenoy, General Counsel Julie Rico, Inspector General Lung Chu, and Board Clerk Carol Bass. Senior staff members will join us periodically as directed by the Superintendent. Today, the board will only have this special meeting, and the meeting will be conducted using Google Meet technology for board members and staff who are participating live. Viewers and listeners can access this meeting by either watching on Comcast Channel 235 or by using the YouTube link on our webpage at palmbeachschools.org. We also offer a listening-only option, which the public can access by calling 561-357-5900 or toll-free at 1-866-930-7015. The meeting ID is 15618801124 hashtag. Now please direct your attention to the flag on the screen. Dr. Fenoy, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. This meeting is being transcribed by a closed captioner, so remember to speak at a reasonable pace. A quick review of our meeting protocol for those of the people that are in attendance. I know the board members all know this already. If you are not speaking, your microphone should be on mute. And as the board members know, if you raise your hands when you want to speak and get my attention, I'll nod to let you know that I've seen you. Raise your hand and I'll recognize you in the order that I see your hands go up. Again, if you need to step away from the meeting for a moment, please turn off your camera. This will let us know that you've stepped away, although we know you can still hear what's happening in the meeting. We have 2 items added for good cause. They are BRD1 and P2. I'll read the good cause statements. As to BRD1 Inspector General contract, good cause exists for adding this item to the agenda now. At the June 17, 2020 virtual special meeting for IG search, the board requested that an employment contract for the new Inspector General be brought for consideration at the June 24, 2020 special meeting. Board action is needed to allow the new Inspector General to assume her duties as soon as possible. As to item P2, personnel addendum, good cause exists to add this item to allow for the new employees to begin as soon as possible. My computer is not cooperating. I can't get to the top of the agenda at the moment, so I think the next thing on the agenda is Stan, if you're listening, you need to come back here, please.
Items withdrawn.
Is there any items to withdraw, Mr. Superintendent?
No, sir. I have nothing to withdraw at this time.
Carol, what's the next item? We can't see the top of the agenda.
Items pulled by board members. So far, we have 1 item pulled, P1.
Any board member want to pull any other item? We need a motion to approve the agenda as modified. Motion by Ms. Brill, seconded by Ms. McQuinn. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Disclosures.
Are there any disclosures by the board members? I see no hands.
Comments.
Okay, board, Mr. Superintendent, comments?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to remind parents, students, staff, and community members joining us right now that the district series of virtual town hall meetings continues this evening. The goal of these meetings is to update you on the district's reopening plans for the 2021-21 school year, and with that, to answer questions that were submitted in advance of those meetings. Each virtual meeting is specific to the needs of the district as a whole, while also taking into account the unique needs of students living in various geographical areas throughout the county. You'll find the full town hall meeting schedule and video links of meetings that already took place at palmbeachschools.org/townhallmeetings. I'd also like to thank the more than 66,000 parents and guardians who responded to our reopening of schools survey. Right now, a district data team is analyzing all of those results. As the process reaches its final stages, we are narrowing down viable reopening options by eliminating plans or suggestions that are just not feasible. Within days, parents and employees will have a much clearer picture of what back to school might look like. This information will, of course, help parents and staff better prepare and focus their efforts accordingly. This will be discussed at greater length during the school board's workshop on July 1st, which is next week. Sharing a quick preliminary overview, I can tell you that generally the respondents were fairly evenly split in their back to school preferences when asked about returning to school full-time, continuing distance learning full-time, or some form of a blended model, which both options would be used. While survey responses hold a lot of weight in the decision-making process, it's important to remember that final decisions that the district will make will be based on a variety of factors, including financial, legal, health, and other requirements that we must meet in the best interest of all of our students, staff, and the community. I'd also like to thank the more than 15,000 members of our staff who responded to a survey specifically addressing their needs. The district will do everything. That survey actually closed last night at midnight. The district will do everything possible to safeguard the health, safety, and well-being of our students and staff while continuing to engage all of our children in high-quality instruction. Ensuring these priorities amid a changing landscape means that we must build flexibility into our plans so that we are prepared to adjust based on changing circumstances and evolving needs. This is going to be what I refer to as the red light, green light year, meaning that we must be prepared to quickly change course when doing so is in the best interest of all of our students and staff. We will be prepared to accomplish exactly that. So at this time, I turn over the podium back over to the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Board member comments, Ms. McQuinn? How about Mr. Shaw? Mrs. Brill? Mrs. Whitfield? Mrs. Andrews?
Yes, just a quick one. I was on the town hall last night with Mrs. Whitfield for the Hispanic, Haitian, Portuguese. It was absolutely a wonderful experience being able to participate and to hear the staff, the wonderful staff, the region superintendents and the staff of Palm Beach County School District guide the public and help them to understand what the issues are as it relates to opening the schools and to give them a voice. So it was wonderful. I'll be tuning into others, but the one that I did attend last night along with Ms. Whitfield, we had a good time. It was great.
Thank you, Mrs. Andrews. Dr. Robinson? We have no speakers on the consent agenda. We have one item pulled, I-1. The board members want to pull anything else? If not, we'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified. Motion by Mr. Shaw, second by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We'll take us to Mrs. Andrews. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It was P1, not I1. It was P1 that I pulled.
Okay. So we have,
That's correct. I1 is left on the consent agenda.
okay. So the only thing left on the consent agenda was I1, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So we had a motion to approve that consent agenda. So under new business, the first item is BRD1. Let me get to that one. I recommend the board approve the proposed Inspector General employment contract and authorize the board chair and superintendent to execute all necessary documents. Motion by Mr. Shaw, seconded by Mrs. Brill. Under discussion, I would just like to first say a few words before board comments. I want to especially thank Attorney Patricia Morales in the General Counsel's office. She worked with me Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday to get all the changes that were needed in there. So I appreciate all the help she gave us, especially over the weekend when Friday everybody else was off, and Ms. Morales was working with us for hours on each one of those days. So I appreciate her help. I also want to point out to the board that we discovered there's a couple other things in the board policy. And I know we've talked about changing the board policy to update it, but there's a couple things in the board policy that were kind of problematic. One thing in the board policy, it says that the Inspector General term should be no less than 4 years. I know we put that in place years ago when we first put Mr. Chu in there. So the General Counsel's office, Ms. Morales, has put a provision in there that where the new Inspector General, the new Inspector General recognizes that there's a 4-year term in the policy, but she's waiving that and accepting the 3-year term at this time. And then there's also a provision that says that the evaluation of the Inspector General must be 4 months prior to the end of the fiscal year, which makes it way back in March 1st when we have to do the evaluation. At some point, we should change the policy on that so that it doesn't have to be so many months before the end of the fiscal year. And also then I'm sure the Inspector General would approve a contract change at that point to fix that provision. But based on the policy language, we went with that date, and that's why it's so early in the year, at March 1st. Other than that, if board members have any questions, comments, Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you, Mr. Barbieri. I completely agree with you. Some of the issues that I have with the IG policy, it's just kind of, it just kind of goes around in circles a little bit. So I feel like, some of those provisions don't need to be in there. And so I'd like to ask that Ms. Michael, when she comes on, that she makes revising this policy, a high priority, because I would love to have her opinion as we go forward with developing a policy that's a little bit more current and fits with her. So, I think let's see if we can work towards that. That would be wonderful, especially just to fix some of these little issues that we have with it.
I agree with you. We had a bunch of hands go up at the same time, so I'm going to call them in the order I think I saw them. Mrs. Brill, then Mrs. McQuinn, then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. And all that I wanted to say, when I interviewed both candidates, I did mention the need for us to revise our policy. So what I would like us to do, though, because there are certain issues that concern me, certain issues that concern all of you, I'd like us to try and have a workshop on that policy as quickly as possible. So not only for Ms. Michael to make it a priority, but for us to have the board clerk schedule an opportunity for us to all discuss it together so that we can iron out all the kinks.
I'm sure I'll work with the superintendent to get that on our calendar as soon as we can. Mrs. McQuinn?
Reiterating the previous comments about the policy, I think we'd agreed to wait until we do have our new IG on board to start working on that. Secondly, thank you for all the time you put into making this happen. And of course, Ms. Michael for making it easy. I'm assuming she made it easy on you. Thank you.
Yeah, she was a pleasure to work with. She was. So it's going to be a great relationship, I think. Dr. Robinson?
So I think maybe Mrs. Brill's comments probably addressed my concerns. So what I was thinking as listening to my fellow board members is that this new IG won't have any true appreciation of what needs to be tweaked in the policy until she sits in that seat for a while. But if we have a workshop, because the board, it's our policy, right? And the policy is based on the institution, not the individual. So if we have a workshop, then we as a collective can work that out, even with her inexperience in the role. But I have some other questions on this item. And I don't mean to be mean or cynical or any of these negative words, but and I'm going to call it experience has led me to this. So I don't see in this policy, the way I read it, for the next 3 years, unless we can document cause, I don't see an option to separate from, and I see legal's hand coming up. So I just need to understand that.
Yeah, Mrs. Rico can answer that, but I saw the same thing, and there's an explanation why I assume you mean there's not a no cause termination in here. Yes.
Correct.
And in reviewing the policy, while we were drafting the agreement, the policy restricts the ability to have that type of clause in the contract.
I believe that was for independence, so that the board couldn't decide. We just didn't like him, like the inspector general, and for no reason at all, we just decided we wanted to fire them because they weren't, so that there's only a for cause provision in there. That's the explanation that I understand from when we initially did that. Dr. Robinson, go ahead.
Yeah, and so I don't know. That's something that I'm a little bit conflicted about because, and no disrespect intended. We haven't seen this IG at work. I mean, honestly, previously we had Mr. Chu as a long time as an auditor, right? I don't have any expectation to think that we will want to part ways. But it troubles me that by contract we get locked in. And so, and the independence argument, I mean, I do remember that. I would like to hear my fellow board members' thoughts on whether or not we should have a supermajority for no cause termination and then amend the policy, as opposed to saying, in this case, the policy locks us in.
All right, Mrs. Rico, then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. Just by way of guidance, you would have to have the new IG, the contracting employee, also waive that provision as we did in annual years, just to point that out.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to agree with Dr. Robinson on this. I was also a little uncomfortable with it being such a long time without having the ability to end the relationship if we needed to. I think, we ask it of our superintendent, and I think there's a reason for that. And I would love to see the same provision. I think a supermajority kind of covers your bases, and I like that idea. But I would love to see that amended as well.
All right, just so the board, I got you, Mrs. Brill and Mrs. Andrews. Just so the board knows, I tried for a 2-year contract. Ms. Michaels said she had watched us and talked about, going outside, and felt that she didn't want to look like she was an interim inspector general while we decided whether we really wanted to have an inside. So she asked for a 3-year, which we all thought was reasonable for a person at that level. So that's why 3-year. And that brought up the point where I looked at the contract and said, but there's not any way to terminate for no cause. And then I remembered, and we looked back, and that was the reason. But a supermajority is what we have, I believe, in the general counsel's contract and also in the superintendent's contract. I believe the next person was Mrs. Andrews, and then Ms. Brill, I think I saw her hand go.
And thank you. And this is not to demean anyone, but as you looked at her resume, this is the first time she will be serving in this kind of capacity. She has not worked within a school district before, working with a board, as well as having this kind of experience. It is a learning process and a tool that we're working through. And so I really do want to make sure that we don't do for her something different than we're doing for the general counsel as well as the superintendent. And there's going to be some support mechanisms that need to be in place for her. So this is very new experience for her as I looked at her background. Thank you.
Ms. Brill?
Thank you. So I don't feel comfortable having the no cause termination. And the reason why is because the inspector general is very different in terms of the relationship with the board versus the superintendent and general counsel. Let's say there's an investigation on one of us and we don't particularly like the way it comes out or something. I just feel like, that's a position where I feel very comfortable with her background, with her experience, with the people that she's been employed by before. So I would not support that change to the contract, but of course, it's going to be majority rule on that. But I'm comfortable with the contract as written.
All right, I think I saw Ms. McQuinn, then Mrs. Andrews, then Dr. Robinson.
I'm also very comfortable with the contract as written, and furthermore, I want to lock down Ms. Michael with her contract tonight.
Mrs. Andrews?
Yes, if there's an investigation of any of us, the superintendent of any of us, we have outside. This is in our policy. So I don't worry about that because that's not anything that she will handle if there's an issue with any of us in these top level positions. Our policy indicates that we have an outside objective party that will work on those issues.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. Again, I'm not expecting a problem, but I just don't like being locked in for 3 years unless I can prove one of the 7 deadly sins or they lose their certification. So if we're done talking, then I'm going to offer, I don't know if it's an amendment, but to the motion to ask Mr. Barbieri to return to the negotiations table to add a termination without cause clause requiring a supermajority vote to the contract.
Okay, Dr. Robinson, just keep in mind, I think in the contracts where we have no cause, we also offer severance pay since we're terminating an employee for no cause. And I believe it's 3 months, and Mrs. Rico shaking her head. I believe that's typically what we have in these contracts where we terminate one of the upper administration or one of our contract employees. So, I mean, I don't know what you want to do with that with respect to your motion.
I'm not going to address that in my motion. My motion stands. I'm leaving it for you to negotiate. We can have subsequent conversation around that, but I don't need to include that in my motion. I just need to get this piece addressed. And so I'm looking for a second.
Seconded by Mrs. Andrews. Discussion? Ms. McQuinn?
Again, I just want to reiterate my position that we get her contract, that it not be renegotiated.
Ms. Brill?
And, you know, time is pressing. So I agree with Mrs. McQuinn. We really need to get this contract in place. And I am comfortable, again, reiterating it. Yes, I do know we have an outside method, but, you know, there's other things that sometimes, you know, people may not be comfortable with. And I believe that for the true independence of that office, I do not have any issue with there being a no cause termination not in the contract.
Mr. Shaw, then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. I agree with Mrs. Brill and Mrs. McQuinn, and I believe we need to move forward with this.
Mrs. Whitfield.
So I'm very much for Dr. Robinson's motion. The only concern I have is I believe she has to start on Wednesday next week. Is that true? And so we're asking her to start on the same day we would approve her contract?
Well, I suppose if the board is comfortable with, if this motion goes forward and the board is comfortable with me getting that in the contract without coming back to the board and just signing it after the general counsel looks at it, that we don't have to bring it back next week, or we could at least get it signed so it's done and then give you a report next week that it's been finished up. Julian, Rico, you want to weigh in on that?
I would definitely suggest you all do another, if this passes, do another motion authorizing Mr. Barbieri to do just that so that it would be automatic and make it really clear.
All right, if there's no further discussion on Dr. Robinson's first motion, on her motion, all in favor? Opposed? All right, I'm opposed to it, just for the reasons of independence. I don't want the public ever to think that we have the authority to remove an inspector general for something that we just have no reason other than maybe there's some personal reasons. And that's what it would look like, I think. I agree with the rest of you that we're taking a chance on Ms. Michael. She's got a 3-year contract, but there are provisions in the contract. If she doesn't live up to our expectations and she doesn't perform the way we want her to, her evaluation would allow us to terminate her for cause anyway. So, Dr. Robinson.
So let's clarify that because that's not how I read the contract. So please point that out to me, because if I had seen where our evaluation, a poor evaluation would allow us to terminate the contract early, I would not have needed to bring this up. So it's a 3-year contract, the way I read it. And it only talks about extensions, the way I read it. So just please, somebody just make me understand that.
Mrs. Morales, are you there? My understanding is the way this would work is if we can just terminate her because if we give her a poor evaluation, that gets back to the lack of any kind of independence, because we can just decide we all want to give her poor just so we can get rid of her without any cause other than we don't like. So I mean, the evaluation would have to be based, a poor evaluation would have to be based on her doing something in the contract that required us to terminate her, I believe. Mrs. Rico?
Well, yes, thank you. So the termination for cause relates to and is based only on the following: neglect of duty, malfeasance, abuse of power or authority, discrimination, ethical misconduct, failure to maintain the certification as an inspector general at all times during the term of the contract, or for other good cause. So it would have to be, a performance-related issue, good cause, and those items like neglect of duty. Certainly, looking at the evaluation instrument, which I don't have in front of me right now, some of those items, may overlap into the evaluation, but these are specific in terms of a good cause, not great evaluation. Two different things.
Mr. Barbieri, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Dr. Robinson, do you want to finish up on that one, and then I'll go to Mrs. Whitfield?
Yeah, I didn't understand what the general counsel said. So is a poor evaluation legally good cause?
No.
Okay, so so I just want to make sure that if you're correcting me or not. So my understanding is this based on this contract, we could give her a poor evaluation year after year, but she still has a contract until 3 years is up. That's how I'm reading this. So just get me straight now.
Okay. What I'm saying is there may be a nexus in the contract. I do not have the evaluation tool in front of me. There may be a nexus in the contract that covers some of these items, but essentially you have to have these items to stand and base your good cause termination, not merely a C- evaluation in and of itself. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't know what the items in the evaluation tool are given this very moment, so I do not want to get caught up in, is there a section called good ethics? Maybe the individual fell below ethical issues and you're grading them on that in their evaluation, but the standalone items in this for cause are based upon neglect of duty, malfeasance, abuse of power, discrimination, ethical misconduct, failure to maintain the certification. So they may be also included in the evaluation, but they have got to be for cause basis.
And I guess that's what that's what I meant. I mean, the evaluation would reflect that she had violated one of those things in her contract, and we'd give her a poor evaluation based on that. But I see where you're coming from, Dr. Robinson. Bad evaluation on its face would not allow us to do that unless she's violated the terms of the contract. Otherwise, I think Mrs. Whitfield was next, and then Mrs. McQuinn.
All right, so I'm always trying to find some sort of common ground here, and I realize that nobody or the board doesn't want to go for a no cause, but what if we amended it so that it was a slightly less burden of proof? Because I feel like right now that level is so high that it's very difficult to prove that someone has gotten that off track. And I want to make sure that we're clear enough that we have the ability to control this position to some level. I want it to be independent, but I don't want her to just be here for 3 years and find out that she's doing a terrible job. I don't expect that will happen. I really don't. But I think we have gotten ourselves in places before where we have written things and then been stuck. And I just want to make sure we don't do that. I think it's just being prudent.
All right, Mrs. McQuinn, then Mrs. Brill.
Well, two things. One, we already voted on this. But secondly, when it says or other good cause, that says or. So we don't know what that other good cause is, but we do have or other good cause.
Ms. Brill, then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. So Mrs. McQuinn basically took the words out of my mouth. For Mrs. Whitfield, I don't really want any control of this position. I really feel that the independence is crucial, and I do agree that or other good cause covers us. So I know Dr. Robinson wants to speak, but I think we need to move on. We have voted and move on.
Dr. Robinson.
So let me just go back because never mind, let me not say that. So I just want to be crystal clear. What I understood our general counsel to say is other good cause, unless other good cause is not the evaluation. So let me just make up a scenario just so people understand what I'm saying. So let's pretend that there's just chaos in the office. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. I have no reason to believe this. So don't misunderstand me. But let's say that there's just a horrible working environment and everybody is just quitting left and right? Let's just pretend. Is that good cause?
Okay, now you're really getting into personnel.
Well, no, but the point is this.
No.
So it would be reflected in the evaluation. And so I'm going to pretend for the sake of the conversation that at least five board members would think, oh my goodness, that's not a good thing, right? We need to change horses in midstream. Bad evaluation. Then does that mean then the contract can end? Because the way I read it, it does not. I don't need to continue this conversation forever, right? I'm fine with getting a legalized memo to clarify this stuff. But I think, and I want the record to reflect that I think it's a mistake to not have contracts that allow for a no-cause termination. I think that they should be super majorities, right? It's going to be very hard for some kind of little conspiracy theory where I don't like you to get me to get 5 votes. Okay, so that does not interfere with the independence concept. But I mean, this is a live and learn thing for me. And so I'm fine if legal wants to give us a memo later.
Okay. Will do.
Mrs. Andrews, you had another question, comment?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment because I keep hearing about this position being independent. All of us sitting here as board, we've had an inspector general for a long time. We have truly been respectful of the inspector general's position and department and what they need to do. I've sat on this board for 10 years, and I know I respect the independence of the inspector general. I think the kinds of discussions we're having here are really critical, that we kind of air out whatever the needs are before we begin someone new. So as far as independence, I have faith in all of us on the board to make sure that we always respect that. And so these kinds of discussions that we're having here are good discussions so that we can make the right decisions to move forward. This is a new experience for our new employee, which will be the inspector general, and for all of us. But I have no doubt that all of us here as board members will respect independence. Thank you.
All right, so if there are no further motions, we'll move on with the next agenda item. We voted on that one already. Ms. Brill?
I don't think we voted on the actual
Please
contract.
vote on the main motion, please.
Okay, I thought it went 4-3, but the main motion was,
That was the amendment.
okay, that was the amendment. Okay, so we'll take a vote on the main motion to approve the contract for Mrs. Michaels. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 5-2 with Dr. Robinson and Mrs. Andrews in opposition. The next item on the agenda is P1, Mr. Superintendent, the
Wait,
personnel.
I'm sorry, Mr. Barbieri, I'm sorry to be disruptive. I couldn't get my mic on. I would just like the record to reflect that my problem was with the language in the contract. It has nothing at all to do with the individual who'll be stepping into the IG role.
No problem. Board Clerk will make that notation in the minutes. The next item, Mr. Superintendent, is P1, personnel agenda.
Yes, sir. I recommend the board approve the personnel agenda as submitted.
Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on. The motion was made by Ms. Brill, seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next item, Mr. Superintendent, is P2.
Yes, sir. I recommend the board approve the personnel addendum as submitted.
Motion by Ms. Whitfield, seconded by Mr. Shaw. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. PIR1, COVID-19, Mr. Superintendent.
Mr. Barbieri, I think P2 was pulled.
P1 was pulled.
P1, excuse me.
P1, and I've been raising my hand to speak.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitfield. Mrs. Manders, I didn't see your hand. You're speaking on P2?
No, P1, that's the one that I pulled.
Okay. So let's go back to P1. We just took a motion on P1, so Mrs. Andrews, go ahead and speak on P1.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to say about P1, this is the one that I spoke about, I guess, last week. With all the data, I sent a question in to see how we could find out the names of people behind this data. This is an annual report that has to be done by July 1 by statute. So this is a good thing. But as a board member, I think we need to kind of know sometimes the actions behind these reappointments. And so one of the questions I'd like to ask the superintendent, first, maybe next year, before we go with this, because we've got to get it done, that before we bring this to the board, maybe have an individual discussion with me or any other board member that would want to know something. I looked at this and I looked under staff employees. That was one of the things I looked at. I saw 17 people that's administrators to teachers. So it sounded at the beginning like this was a good thing, but then I'm not quite sure if that's a good thing or not. Do we have administrators that are staff employees that are moving into teachers? Or is this someone that's an administrator that was at a school district that went to the staff that's being demoted? I'd like for someone to explain to me about what happens when I see the term administrator to a teacher. That's my first question. 17 people moving from administration to a teacher. Can somebody help me with that?
Yeah, I think as I understand the rules of this, every board member, the HR team is ready and able to sit with any board member that wants to go through this long list. But I'll turn it over to Dr. LaCava. Legal has given us some very clear rules on what to say and not to say.
So thank you, Dr. Fanoy. I just want to make sure I have Mark and Mitchell on the line, and I know that he spent some time with board members throughout the week, and I know he was answering some of those questions. Mr. Mitchell, can you kind of share with the board in regards to that question that Mrs. Andrews is asking?
Mr. Mitchell, your microphone is off.
My apologies. Good afternoon, board members, and yes, Ms. Andrews, be happy to answer your question. The reappointment of administrators to teachers is reappointing, for instance, someone who may be a specialist or so forth at the district, or an administrator in school reappointed to a teaching position. And just to elaborate a little bit on this year's reappointment process, the board made some suggestions last year to enhance the process, and we've taken that to heart. And for this year, the process consisted of basically multiple phases. You know, the first phase being our HR partners work with principals and also with department heads during the year on any individuals for where there's concerns or any issues. And then the second phase of that is a review by the instructional superintendents with the regional superintendents. Then they send their proposals to the HR department for another review. Then that's reviewed by the chief of HR and the deputy superintendent with the regional superintendents, offering the rationale for their proposals. The next level of review goes to legal. Our legal department gets involved and we coordinated meetings with legal and the regional superintendents, instructionals, chief of HR, deputy superintendent, and myself to review all those actions. So we thank the board for making recommendations to enhance the process, and I hope that helps address some of your questions.
Mrs. Andrews, your microphone's off if you want to speak.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to do next year is before we get to the time for this, that there be some more conversation. Because as I look at this, there could be assistant principals or principals that's going back to teaching that I may not know about. I know there's thousands of papers that go with this, and you're going through a process in-house. But I think it needs to be a little bit more communication and collaboration as to who we're talking about. As we look and we talk, we say we haven't laid off anybody, and I guess these people have poor performance or whatever is going on here. As a board member, I truly, as a board member, would like to know more information about, especially if staff employees that's going back to teaching, to make sure that those might be the right kinds of people to be in a teaching position. We haven't had any of those kinds of questions. We don't really know what's going on. As a board member, I certainly don't. And I worry about this whole piece with the numbers and not having enough information for me as a board member to approve. I'm going to approve it today with reluctance. Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell, did you have anything to follow up? Your microphone's still on. You're done?
Yes, sir. My comments are complete unless there's a further question.
Any other questions from the board on that? All right. Mr. Superintendent, that'll take us to PIR1, the COVID-19 rider for specialty leases.
Yes, sir. I recommend the board approve COVID-19 rider provisions for 2 specialty leases: the Everett Tennis Academy, LLC, and Motorcycle Training Institute, Inc., and authorize the board chair and superintendent to sign all necessary documents.
Motion by Ms. Brill, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That's the end of the new business items. The next item on the agenda is BD1. It's a board